Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third KDI School Development Talk Series virtual event. My name is Min Jung Yoon, and I work in the KDI School of Public Policy and Management. Today, I will be serving as your MC for today's webinar. Before we get started, please be aware that today's webinar is being live streamed and recorded for knowledge sharing purposes and will be uploaded to the KDI School's official YouTube channel. For today's event, we will be listening to distinguished speakers from Peru who will offer us insightful presentations on Peru's climate change policies. Simultaneous English-Korean interpretation is also being provided for today's event. So please set your language interpretation preferences in your Zoom settings. We would ask that you keep your mic muted whenever you're not speaking. If you have any questions or comments during the presentations, please write them in the chat and we will address them during the Q&A session after the presentations are over. Now, I would like to start by inviting our distinguished speakers to deliver their opening remarks. First, Dr. Jin-Soo Lee, the Associate Dean of the Office of Development Research and International Cooperation and a professor at the KDI School, will open our session. Please welcome Professor Lee.
Thank you for your introduction. Your Excellency, all of our distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, participating online, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. On behalf of the KDI School of Public Policy and Management, I want to welcome everyone to our third installment of the 2023 KDI School Development Talk webinar series. I want to sincerely thank each and every one of you for your interest and participation in today's event. Since 2021, the KDI School's Development Talk series has served as an opportunity for us to host policy webinars on issues concerning developing countries selected among Korea's 27 priority partners. We are looking at environment policies this year. Whether we are discussing the greenhouse effect or the decline of biodiversity, our key challenge is finding a workable consensus that reflects the realities of both developed and developing countries. Today, we are here to discuss Peru's responses to climate change. Since Korea and Peru had established diplomatic relations back in 1963, the two countries have become closer to each other through a comprehensive cooperative partnership and celebrate the 60th anniversary this year. Collaborating with the bicentenary plan of Peru, Korea has set the partnership goals in contributing to its sustainable economic growth and social integration through balanced national development. I hope that all the participants today will learn more about the current state of climate change in Peru and policy responses the country takes. I hope that both countries can work together to adjust to the environmental dimensions of sustainable development. This webinar would not have been possible without the support of Peruvian Embassy in Korea, as well as the KDI School's extensive global network. In this regard, I'd like to express special thanks to our distinguished speakers. Ambassador Paul Fuller from the Embassy of Peru in the Republic of Korea, Mr. Carlos Andres from the Development of International Trade, Mr. Danny Eric Wilson from the Embassy of Peru in the People's Republic of China, and Mrs. Beatrice from the Peruvian Environment Fund. Lastly, I want to thank everyone who joined our webinar today. I hope our time together will provide a wonderful learning opportunity. I look forward to the lively discussions and various suggestions, inspiring collaborative action and coordination for Paris sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Next, Mr. Paul Dukulas, the Ambassador of Peru in Korea, will be delivering congratulatory remarks.
Mr. Jean Solis, Associate Dean of KDI School of Public Policy and Management, dear participants and friends of Peru. I would like to start by congratulating KDI for organizing and hosting this very interesting talk series focusing on relevant topics for Peru as well as Korea. We value our relationship with KDI as a recognized institution and a trustful partner of Peru since the year 2011, when we signed a memorandum of understanding. To date, approximately 8 diplomatic officials and many other Peruvians have graduated from its very diverse study offer. For this reason, we consider KDI as an important ally during these 60 years of friendly relations and mutual cooperation that Peru and Korea celebrate in this year 2023. A relationship that is based on common values, complementary economic links, and a positive agenda that has led us to sign a free trade agreement in 2011 and a comprehensive strategic association since 2012. Korea is currently our fourth economic commercial market and one of our most important investment associates, particularly in the fields of gas and infrastructure. It is also symptomatic that one of the topics chosen for this seminar refers to the environmental challenge that both countries have to confront day to day. I'm referring to climate change. Peru is one of the top 10 world biodiverse countries, which encompasses ecosystems, species, and genetic resources that coexist with the ancestral knowledge of indigenous people. In the same way, Peru is highly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. That is the reason this is a priority topic that we have privileged in our relationship with Korea. We have just concluded the negotiation of an agreement on cooperation of climate change. It will help us to strengthen our capacity to reduce or eliminate anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases and adapt us to the adverse effects of climate change, and thus facilitate the transition of two countries toward low carbon and climate resilient economies according to our NDCs. Likewise, at the multilateral level, Peru and Korea has promoted the negotiation of an agreement against plastic pollution, including into the ocean, whose process is currently shared by Peru, after we introduced a resolution on the United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA, last year. We welcome that this negotiation process will have its fourth meeting in Seoul, Korea, during the second semester of 2024. As I conclude, I reiterate my recognition to KDI to be part of this 60-year celebration of a relationship that has overcome distance, cultural differences, and language barriers. All of this on the basis of a genuine partnership and friendship that is destined to grow and to be strengthened into the future. 감사합니다.
Thank you for the kind message, Ambassador. Now, I'm pleased to invite today's first presenter, Mr. Carlos Charu. He's a Deputy Director at the Department for Business and Trade in Peru. Today, he will be speaking about Peru's adaptation efforts, nature-based solutions. Everyone, please welcome Mr. Chao.
Thank you, Minju. First of all, let me congratulate the school. I am alumni from KDI school, so I'm very honored to be today with you and with all the participants. Thank you, Deputy Dean, for the kind invitation. And I'm glad to be with you discussing this very important and very important topic that gathered us today. And I would like to emphasize a little bit what Peru is trying to
페루가 지금 현재
mitigations of the climate change.
기후변화 감축을 위해서 어떤 노력
Because of some of the climate phenomena that affected Peru in the last 6-7 years. I will appreciate Mi Jung if you can help me with the slides today. It's interesting that I'm now not in the capital, but I'm in the province of Cusco. Probably most of you know that because of the recent film Transformers. And I very surprised that it's being 12 a.m. in the morning. This town is celebrating the one of the most interesting days in the entire year, which is probably will interrupt a little bit my presentation, but hopefully not too much. So if you can move to the next slide, Minju. Maybe as the ambassador, Peruvian ambassador to Korea mentioned, Peru is one of the most blessed countries in the world, I would say, having the world's biggest tropical forest, the second biggest extension of the Amazon in the world.
규모로 봤을 때는 두 번째로 큽니다. 그리고 생물 다양성도 상당히 다양한
most biodiverse countries globally, and 70% of all tropical glaciers are in Peru. But given this blessed from this biodiversity, also Peru is also affected by all the climate challenges that we can imagine, and therefore increasing temperatures, floodings, also some droughts and landslides are happening in Peru. One of the most severe and most strong effects of climate happened in 2017, which is called the El Niño phenomenon, affected the country in February 2017. If you can change the slide, please, Minjun. The next one, please. This natural disaster was once the biggest natural disaster in history of the country. Affected nearly 2 million people and killed over hundreds. It was just in the middle of summer in the north of the country, and even in the capital, we suffer this, and we notice this very, very, very badly. The infrastructure in the country suffer so dramatically that almost 5 billion of services, assets, and different kind of infrastructure were damaged, with sometimes, in some cases, difficult to restore. Given that the situation, the government immediately created an authority to reconstruct and rebuild the infrastructure damaged by the climate, but also with an idea to create a different kind of infrastructure that will maintain and sustain a potential and future effect of the climate. That's why they call the reconstruction authority with changes. And changes means that they create or they facilitate different kind of infrastructure to contain the rivers or contain the floods that may happen in the future, but also to start planning differently. As I said, Peru is a biodiversity country, have a lot of different kind of climates you can imagine. And as I said, we are also blessed to be at this kind of country, but also the challenge that put that into the public officers is very huge. So if you can move to the next slide. No, 5 years from a phenomenon Del Niño have already passed, but some of that infrastructure could not be in place yet, no? And this is example for in the north again. It's a city called Patas. that if you can see in the picture of the left, the city was situated or located in the bottom of a very big mountain. That if you see on the right, in the picture of the right, a big amount of land was slide from the top to the bottom, destroying houses, schools, hospitals. But if you notice, and this is also important to think about, is the planning of the city always was to surrounding the mountain, which probably wasn't a good plan since the very beginning. The problem that has created over the years is that the families, or probably not very well planned from the municipality, allows families to start living.
네, 그리고 여러 가정들을 위해서 이렇게 산 주변에 있는
deteriorating and deforesting the mountain and the green area of the mountain. And that's also make us think, what is the effects of challenging the nature, no? If you don't consider the nature in your plans, that's fine. But if you challenge nature constantly, you are forcing the nature that could happen these scenarios again in the future. So what the Reconstruction Authority begin to do was to implement different kind of plans to build differently the infrastructure for the future. If you can change to the next slide, please. One of the most interesting measures was to start planning a different kind of nature infrastructure that will contain potential and future flood or bigger rains on the top of the mountains, that basically are the ones that in the end destroy cities and affect agriculture on the way. So for instance, if you can continue passing the slide, you will see. The authorities start with a planning to identify where the river basins that more dramatically can affect different cities in Peru. Interesting fact that, as I said, in Peru, the biodiversity is that 70% of the population live in the coast. And the coast also is very close to a change of mountain called Andes, that probably you have heard of this, but it's 2% of the water that are in the country is only in the coast, and 98% goes to the forest. But that 2% in rainy seasons may cause a lot of issues in different cities that are not prepared. So what the authorities began to do was to reforestate different areas of the country, and have planned to reforestate 51,000 hectares. I think it was among top countries in the world, was one of the biggest initiative among countries in the world. You know, this is a massive operation. For that, they have considered at least 1.3 million labor workforce to install all the trees, to plant the trees. They're going to be located in 17 river basins along the Pacific Ocean, and it requires an investment around of $200 million. So that is not going to be the only nature-based solution that is being implemented, but it's going to be complemented with other brown and gray infrastructure like dams, ditches, and different infrastructure that will cover the different side of the rivers that when the El Niño phenomenon happens, destroy agricultural farms and cities. If you can continue, Minjung. But not only that, no, because the nature is so unpredictable that the river can change the stream without noticing. So alongside this initiative, Peru is implementing something that's called early warnings. It's a satellite technology that will be implemented in the top of the rivers and the mountains that will alert different cities when these kind of climate effects start changing or start happening. And that's why cities are going to be trained in the use of this technology and also in evacuation and emergency simulations, so they can react quickly when happen this again. This is something that the authorities progressing implementing. This is all being implemented in recent months. Actually, it was planned 2 years ago, but it's, as you imagine, this takes time, especially with some problems that the public investment have in the country. Can you move to the next slide, please? Here, I wanted to show you some of this nature infrastructure that it was not invented recently. Peru have decades and centuries using this kind of agriculture methods. So there are terraces that contain the water that actually water some of the seeds that are planted in the mountains in the highlands in Peru that come from the Inca times, and that's actually, without thinking too much, has been supporting Peru for centuries, and we didn't notice that very much until now. But with this knowledge and this important technology, you can resist and you can fight against climate change. Something, and this is maybe something to discuss later, this is the contribution from Peru to climate change to the world. If you can move to the next slide, please. To finalize, I would like just to mention summarize this strategy and the outcomes and the added value that it is creating in the country. So basically, the objective of this plan was to minimize the exposure of the climate change, to reduce vulnerability of different areas that have or are close to mountains. And the river basins, basically, there are, as you notice, is 19 river basins along the coast that are going to receive the deliverables and the results of this plan. And combine all these plan of great and green infrastructure and knowledge and training to be implemented in the community. The idea is to increase the resilience of the infrastructure that's going to be created for these cities that live near the mountains. In the end, the authority and the country wants to create environmental awareness, social impact, reducing the effects of the climate into the cities, and also create economic growth, implementing all these kind of projects in different regions in Peru. Could you change to the last slide? And to finalize, what we think about infrastructure in the country is changing. What we thought in the past is now changing the view of the authorities. They see more benefits in investing more in nature-based solutions, and for example, including other countries like Canada, the UK, they have estimated that $200 million is required to invest in 14 river basins in Peru. And it's proof that these kind of solutions is more than 30% cost effective that the traditional solutions, and is creating more effects on the mitigation for climate change up to 2030. It's imminent that El Niño phenomenon is coming back to Peru, not only to Peru, but in different countries alongside the Pacific Ocean. But this also may accelerate the possibilities to invest more in natural infrastructure. The add to social value of investing in natural infrastructure is important to cities and to societies in the country that probably doesn't see this as the return of investment probably is not so obvious for them, because cities in the country have other necessities, and because of that they prioritize different kind of projects. But the proof and the impact of this investment is really huge. And well, this is I think the Peruvian example probably could be some interesting topic to discuss in the future. And the results of this program that we're not going to see now, but it's going to be resulted in the future. I think it will be also important topic of discussion for different countries that doesn't have this kind of ecosystems, or doesn't have this kind of natural scenarios, but could use this example to see how these important mitigation and adaptation measures can be resulting in reducing global warming and effects of climate change. Thank you so much for your attention, and here I am happy to answer any kind of questions.
Thank you for your informative presentation, Mr. Carlos Charo. Let's keep things moving with our next presenter. I'm pleased to invite Mr. Denny Pina Garcia. He is currently working in the political section of the Embassy of Peru in China today. He will be delivering his speech entitled International Cooperation and the Growth of Peru's Green, Social, and Sustainable Market. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Denny.
Thank you so much, Mingyun, for your kind presentation. I will begin thanking the invitation of KDI, saying as my predecessor, Carlos Chao, and the next speaker, Beatriz Canchari, we are KDI alumni from Peru. And our experience in Peru has been, experience in Korea, while studying in Korea, was pretty interesting. And I'm pretty honored to be right now presenting one aspect of the topic that convened us today. I must thank the works of Associate Dean Jiniso Lee, and also from our ambassador in Korea, Ambassador Paul Duclos. I will begin my presentation. I will begin with my presentation, that is International Cooperation, the Growth of Peru, Green, Social, and Sustainable Market. As you can see, my presentation will be divided in 4 aspects. I will try to, the first and the last one will be pretty summarized, because are basically facts about the situation, about Peru profile. And I think that my predecessor, his presentation was pretty good and deep regarding Peru's profile. And I will only try to highlight certain aspects that are more related to the core of my presentation, that is current situation of Peru environment, and specifically the growth of Peru green, social, and sustainable market. That is the core of my presentation. As well, there are certain facts. Peru is a country that is of more than 1 million kilometers square, is one of the biggest in America, and has a population of more than 33 million. As I put, the population of Peru has doubled in only 50 years. Since the 1972, it has already doubled, and it demonstrates how Peru as a country has grown, not only in terms of economy, but also in terms of population and in other aspects. The urban population, though, is almost more than third quarters. Is 82% of our population lives in cities. And this is really important because Peru is a country of biodiversity. It has 8 natural regions, so each part of our country has different ecosystems. But more than half our population, almost 3 parts of our population living in urban cities, it has something to do with our situation. Also, Peru has a cultural diversity and millenary society. Our economy is pretty big. There are some data that I put here. Our GDP in last year was more than 233 billion in US dollars. It was the sixth biggest in Latin America and the Caribbean, the whole Latin America and the Caribbean. Our exports are pretty big also, but are more mainly focused on minerals and agri-industry. As an example, our biggest share of our export balance is mainly minerals. It has been growing in recent years in the aspect of agri-industry because it has added value chain and it creates a lot of work, especially in certain parts of the country, but it's not that big still. The foreign direct investment in Peru reached, well, more than 11 billion, with an increase of more than 55% from one year to another, from 2021 to 2022. But what this relates to us is that Peru as a country, as a big economy, is growing and is attracted for foreign investment. Our inflation rate, although the situation in many countries has been pretty bad after the COVID and all the recession situation, still, although it's high, but it's within standards and is kind of one of the best in the region. What is the situation of Peru environment in this context? Peru is not a substantial greenhouse gas producer. It's not a substantial greenhouse gas emitter, because we are a country that, as I said, our economy is mainly exporting minerals and agro-industry. It's not manufacturing, it's not second-tier industry. So we are not producing that much greenhouse gases. Although this might be the situation, but we are a highly vulnerable country, as already was said by my predecessor, by Ambassador Duclos. We are a country that is highly vulnerable to the impact of climate change, because according to the characteristics recognized by the United Nations framework, Peru accounts for 7 of those vulnerability characteristics. Of those 9, almost all the vulnerability characteristics are related to our country, and certain aspects are related to this division of our population. Most of them live in cities. We have a very big diversity, but there are situations regarding what my predecessor spoke that are related to this. Around 70% of our natural disasters in Peru are related to climate change and extreme weather. El Niño is a good example, and my predecessor has spoken a little bit about it, so I won't go deep on it. But this affects our economy also. This affects sectors, our agricultural sector, affect our cities. We lost houses because of these disruptions. We also had issues with our basic public services such as electricity, education, and all their kind of services. Around 20% of our forests are located in the lands of indigenous communities. And well, Peru is, although this is the fact about Peru environment, Peru is an international environmental country. It's committed to international environmental standards. We are part of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We are also part of the United Nations Convention to combat desertification and the Biodiversity Convention, and also other important conventions like the Arhus Convention, the Minamata Market Convention, the Marrakesh Convention. Peru is a country committed to climate change, not because it's a big producer, but because we are vulnerable as a country. And that's the role of international cooperation that is the core of my presentation. What are our goals? What are Peru climate goals? Our Ministry of Environment has determined that the main Peru climate goal is mitigation. In 2020, Peru updated its nationally determined contribution, limiting emissions, and by 2030, by establishing a standard to reduce at 40%. So it's 6 lower than the previous standard of 2016. So it demonstrates how committed in terms of goals Peru is. So what are the characteristics that we want to implement regarding that adaptation? So there are 7 priorities areas regarding the adaptation of the objectives to be measured in Peru, where we have to adapt: agriculture, forests, fisheries, aquaculture, health, water, tourism, and transport. Why is this important? Agriculture, fisheries, and aquaculture are really important for our economies, are a sector in our economy that is growing, and it could contribute to decrease the impact of mining in our country, although mining has their own framework. Investment in sustainable infrastructure, especially in agriculture and industry, can also help mitigate impacts. It's another goal. And in general, Peru is strongly committed to the protection and bioeconomy in the Amazon rainforest. Those are our commitments in general. How this has been growing for Peru was really important. The commitment into the international commitment that was done on the COP20 in Lima in 2014. Also, our stock exchange joined a sustainable stock exchange initiative. So here you have certain aspects of how this has been incremented in Peru, our commitments, and how the growing of this kind of market, sustainable green market, has been growing. The following year, the Peruvian Securities Authority required listed companies to disclose reports regarding sustainability. Also, the Ministry of Environment, as I said, signed the Green Protocol with financial institutions to promote the adoptions of this kind of criteria of sustainability. Then the superintendents of banks and insurance implemented a regulation regarding environmental risk management. Then on 2017, our Lima Stock Exchange integrated to the market, to the MILA, the Latin American Integrated Market, announcing an agreement regarding this, about new regional environmental, social, and governance. On 2018, the Lima Stock Exchange published its Green Bond Guide for Peru. On 2019, there was this new plan of competitivity that established the focus on green financial instruments, tools to provide new technology in order to support our efforts in climate change. 2020, again, 2021, and 2022. What I want to finish is that the growing of our green economy, but our fintech economy, has been really exponential in last year, especially after the pandemic. In 2022, the Ministry of Environment announced its intention to develop a green finance taxonomy to standardize the market and to promote the effects of this kind of tools in our economy. It was done by the German Corporation of International Cooperation. Well, the GIS supported the initial scoping of the work of the ministry, but this demonstrates the purpose of my presentation. Peru is a country with a lot of vulnerabilities. It has a lot of goals, but it needs international cooperation, the cooperation of other countries, the experiences, the research of other countries in order to advance its goals. And that's the main aspect about my presentation. International cooperation has been really helpful for Peru. And in this specifically field, the green and sustainable market, the green fintech market, using new technologies, has been really important, and private initiative too. The Superintendency of Banking and Insurance established a regulation of social and environmental risk management. An example is that another financial institutions, entities force this criteria into their rules for granting any credit of finance. So in order for a company to obtain credit from the financial market, they have to demonstrate sustainability criteria. And the best example for me, and that I will try to portray to you, is the Vivienda Fund. So less interest rate for housing loans, which better ways management of the construction and green areas. So if they have criteria regarding sustainable management, about construction, about waste in general, they will be giving less interest rate. So it will be more attractive and companies will try to accommodate to the criteria. So that's the important about all this growth, because what we establish is a kind of green protocol. A green protocol where the finance market tries to share or to reach the gap that exists with the real economy. So the Green Protocol is signed by financial entities of the government. The protocol is to guarantee the transition to green finance in Peru. So what had been done in general is that the Peruvian government for the first time issued 2 sustainable bonds for a total of more than 3.2 million and a social bond of 1 million. So what is important of this is that we are creating a green finance taxonomy that identifies the economic activities that are friendly with the environment and contribute to mobilize public and private capital towards it, becoming it more attractive and help it to our environmental friendly goals. So the idea is to standardize this criteria to reach the gap between the real economy and financial economy by giving loans to agricultural companies that use less water in order to produce, or that create technology that can be helpful to that, to mining companies that want to invest in new technologies like solar panels and not traditional oil and gas. Could be. The idea is to standardize. So, but also to avoid the greenwashing, this idea that is very common in the financial economy, that there is not real impact. So when we have a
때는
standardization,
이러한 채굴 산업이
what is green fintech, green finance, we wouldn't have this kind of issue. So this system has been implemented by the Ministry of Environment. It will be worth by 2025 more than 2 billion, and by 2030 more than 5.8 billion. So what are the success cases? State Peruvian Bank Mi Vivienda established 86% of its products are associated to green instruments. Private bank BBVA is going to move 300 million in sustainable finance by 2025. And there is a microfinance institution, Caja Inca, that launched a green credit focus on livestock sector. How it has been helped? Well, I will give some examples. The International Environmental Cooperation that we had, one of the best examples besides what I already spoken about Germany cooperation, is also United Kingdom. We have with the United Kingdom certain instruments that are really helpful for that. The Memorandum of Understanding for Climate Action about ministry level, in our Ministry of Environment with the competing environment of the other side. The UK Sustainable Infrastructure Programme, the UK Partnering for Accelerated Climate Transition. Also, we had cooperation from the United Nations Framework. We have the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for Peru 2022-2026. And we also have the impact on the investments for sustainable use of biodiversity in Peru through German cooperation. So to summarize this, is Peru is committed to green finance, but it's committed through the help not only of our own efforts, but through the help of others. And that's the important conclusion that I want to reach.
Thank you for the informative presentation, Mr. Denny. Next, we'll be hearing our last presenter from Peru. I'm pleased to invite our third speaker, Ms. Beatriz Canchari Aramitano. She is currently working at the Peruvian Environmental Fund, and today she will deliver a speech about Propumpen's role in achieving the year 2030, and Peru's climate change agenda. Everyone, please welcome Ms. Canchari Ermitano.
Thank you, Minju, for the presentation. Thanks for my previous college to this interesting introduction and description of Peru. So currently, actually, I will present about what is the role of Profonampe, which is the organization where I am working currently. Okay, I will. Okay, so also, as Danny mentioned, I study in Kiria. I am very happy to be part of this conversation. So, and I was playing what is the Profonampe role in the 2030 agenda and the climate change agenda in Peru. So I'm currently working there and as sustainable development specialist. So I will start the presentation with a question. So why an environmental fund is important to Peru? As my previous colleagues mentioned, we have a lot of challenges, we have a lot of opportunities, as we have a lot of diversity also. So first, we have an environmental minister in Peru. So this is part of the public sector, but Profonampe is a private organization with a public objectives. So we work very close with this ministry to the climate change agenda. But also we increase our focus to the sustainable development agenda, like which is related with the SDGs. So, but I will mention two examples that how we work with this minister as a private organization. So first of all, we consolidate the green agenda in a strategic way and get more involved in a sustainable development agenda. And second, we accelerate the management of environmental liabilities, energy matrix, sustainable cities, among others, and be efficient in the use of the resources of the contingency funds for environmental remediation. So, and one of the important points of Profonampe, this is the only environmental fund which exists in Peru. So, but we are not only the only environmental fund, but we are accredited by two important international funds. As Danny mentioned, it's important to have the support of the international resources or international agencies. The first of these is Green Climate Fund, which is located in South Korea. The other is Adaptation Fund. We were accredited this year with a Green Climate Fund for 5 years more, and the last year we were accredited by Adaptation Funds. And also we are part of this network of environmental funds of Latin America and the Caribbean, so which is very important to work together for the climate change agenda of these continents. So as you see, we are like a environmental fund. We work with international or high international standards for mitigate the impacts of the climate change. So previous this introduction, so I will mention what is Profonampe, because like it's a fund, but as a fund, we are specialists in efficiently raising and managing financially resources for the execution of programs and projects that contribute to the conservation of biodiversity and the mitigation and adaptation of climate change, which is part of the 2030 agenda. So our services are like fundraising, design,
기금 조성을 합니다. 또 이니셔티브를 설계하고 이행을 하고 기술 지원을 제공하고 모니터링과 평가도 합니다. 재무, 행정 관리도 하고 투자 포트폴리오를 관리하고요. 가시성, 홍보, 인지도 제고 활동을 하고 있고요. 지식 관리도 하고 있습니다.
We work in these fields, protect areas. We have a lot of this in Peru, forests, marine coastal, water and mechanisms of rewards for ecosystem services, environmental liabilities, and sustainable cities. So this year we will reach 30 years old as a private organization who work with the environmental minister. So I will show just a brief like impact figures that you can see what as our results that we obtain during this time. So in terms of indigenous people, we work with indigenous from the jungle, from the Andes. So around we work with 25 of them. In terms of social impact, we reach more than 27,000 direct and indirect beneficiary. 31% were women. In terms of sustainable use, 470 communities was involved in the sustainable use of resources. In terms of bio businesses, we implement more than 75 bio businesses across our territory. In terms of projects, only the last year we implement 34 projects. 25 of them were with a technical responsibility because we have a lot of like different relation with depends of the projects. In terms of adaptation, we implement around 143 practices or technology for the climate adaptation. In terms of mitigation, we reach 241,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent reduced or avoided during the last year. In terms of conservation terrestrial ecosystems, more than 80 million hectares of territorial ecosystem were conserved. In terms of marine, was more than 120,000 hectares of marine ecosystem were conserved. In terms of financing, we get more than 396 million during these 30 years. And also we have a lot of partners. One of them that I would like to highlight is KOICA, what is the Korean corporation. Jung Won Lee, who was the former director of KOICA in Peru, visited one of the projects that support in the jungle. I will describe here. The project was the title Creation of Business Model Based on Solar Energy for Biobusinesses in Daten del Marion, which is located in Loreto. The first action was Profonampe and KOICA signing a co-financing agreement for the implementation of these projects. The goal was to reduce the vulnerability of the indigenous community of the climate change through a sustainable use of natural resources. Through the provision of ice plants to 2 communities in the jungle, Musa Carucha and San Fernando, supplied with photovoltaic energy, which will supply artisanal fishermen with crushed ice and will facilitate the marketing of fresh Amazon fish. You can see here in the right side the photos of this. These are the solar panel who were donated for the Korean corporation. And in the both part, you can see the ice was important for the conservation of the fish. So it was very important, this donation. And here you can see the day of the inauguration of the plants. One of the director visit with like part of these other Korean professionals that you can see in the photos. And that's very important that, as you can see, Profonampe is the connector of international cooperation and in this case, the indigenous community who needs technology support for adapt to the climate change. So now they can preserve the fish and they can increase their incomes and also their quality of life. So others organizations that work with us are Inter-American Development Bank, World Bank. So that's important that we need to work together for the same object in our country. Some other executors are like from the regional government, local governments, different ministers. The first of all, the most important is the environmental ministry, and others like housing, production, mining. Those are important for work together for the same objects. And I think it's the last part, because we have like a lot of projects and programs that I can explain, but I will need more time. So, but Profonampe are working to be the reference partner in Latin America for the implementation of the environmental agenda. First of all, the focusing the Peruvian agenda, but that's important to also be focused in work as a continent, because we have the same challenges, because we have a lot of diversity and different ecosystems. But I think we are working in that way to reduce the vulnerability. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for sharing your insights with us today, Ms. Beatriz Canchari-Aromitano. I would like to thank all three of our speakers once again for joining us today and sharing their presentations. Now, I would like to introduce Professor Youngjae Kim, who will be leading our discussion. Professor Kim joined the KDI School in 2022. Before joining our school, he worked as a research scientist at the European Institute on Economics and the Environment. Please welcome Professor Kim.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. I really enjoyed three consecutive talks, and it's really a informative and insightful. And thank you about that. And I just want to give the audience, there's one question already in the chat box. So the Carlos, could you please answer for the questions that by Isaac Cho?
Yes, Professor Kim, and thank you for the questions. I think somehow both are related, Shode, and let me try to go through the questions. But what specific environmental regulations are in Peru to be considered when planning and constructing nature infrastructure? I think Peru has been deeply involved in counteracting effects on climate change for decades. As Danny Beatriz mentioned, and the ambassador to Korea has mentioned, the Peru's vulnerability creates a lot of opportunities to collaborate in finding solutions to climate change. In recent years, I think the government
페루 정부에서 프레임워크를 개발했습니다. 계약을 하고 기후 변화
that allows now nature-based solutions. Well, basically in two fundamental processes, which is adaptation and mitigations. But to be honest, there are different legislations in Peru about reforestation and forest management, ecosystem protections. There are institutes that focus the efforts on different areas. But what we need in Peru are best practices, and start creating the knowledge that are going to be useful for different authorities alongside the country that can use that knowledge, and they can use the best practices to implement the solutions in their cities. And there's no regulation that will help them to do that. Definitely the regulation will facilitate the use of public funding, and therefore, yeah, it's important. But there's a say that say, when there is a will, there is a way, right? And when there is a will in terms of building natural infrastructure, when you have best practices in place and and in hand to use it, then it's more impactful into these authorities and most useful for them to use it. I appreciate that the international cooperation will be also critical here because the best practices are there as well. But I reckon that Peru, as I said, have decades of implementing different measures to fight climate change. And also we have experience that we can share with other parts in the world. But we need to gather that knowledge. We need to organize that knowledge and share that and in a friendly way with organizations and authorities to implement the solutions. And that lead me to the second questions on how collaboration and partnerships between private sector, government, and social communities, local communities, can foster the implementation of this. No, and probably in our times, I would say that we need a kind of digital transformation. When we don't know the benefits of these solutions, we don't have an incentive to implement these solutions. Therefore, there could be best solutions in the world, but we will not be able to use it probably through digitalization of the information about the solutions, the best use of the solutions, the facilitation of the norms for authorities and different delivery models that, for example, Beatriz have shared with us, or the ones that are being implemented for the reconstruction program, can be shared in a digital way to different stakeholders that probably doesn't know how to use them or how to implement it, or they don't know the regulations to implement them. Then probably they would do it. No, so I think it's digitalization and the transformation of these digital solutions will foster the collaboration between these stakeholders. And I think when we didn't mention here is the international players that also play a good part on the collaboration here, right? Because collaboration sometimes when it's a local and domestic thing, probably sometimes doesn't work because we have different interests. But sometimes when it comes from abroad, you have different incentives to implement these kind of solutions. And Peru has now good information and best practices that could be useful to analyze in the near future. Thank you for the questions.
Okay, thank you for, I lost connection for a second. So can you guys hear me? Okay. Yes, okay. But I cannot see myself, so unfortunately, but let me proceed. So any other questions from the audience? Or if not, I have a couple of questions. You guys can ask your colleagues and so on, but like I have a couple of questions regarding with the climate change mitigation. I know most of you guys heavily focuses on the climate change adaptation efforts by Peru, and I do agree with that. But I saw a couple of slide on the solar panel in the villages and any other climate mitigation effort. So could you can you please take some examples of the climate mitigation effort in Peru? Or Beatriz, your organization, do you have any project that collaborated with other international organizations?
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I think in the we have another. I think this probably was the first who has the support of the Green Climate Fund, who the object was to preserve the forest, because in order to increase the capture of the carbon dioxide. So we have, I think, in the jungle, we have these projects. So, but the challenge in this kind of project that we need to preserve the forest is to try to tackle the illegal activities that's very very challenging to try to preserve the forest in not cut them to sell the material, but we are working with that. Also the government has a program to preserve. They pay amount of money to the communities to preserve the forest in order not to cut them. So, but yeah, I think that's one of the advance that we have, but also we have this kind of challenge, as I mentioned, like the illegal activities.
Yes.
That that not permit to preserve the forest, because it's more like they have a lot of benefits to cut them and to sell. Yes, I think that's we have like this kind of activities.
Okay, thank you so much for taking example. And illegal activities in this regard reminds me of the illegal mining activities in many other countries beyond Peru. And I'm just curious to know about any type of government policies regarding with responsible and sustainable mining practices in Peru.
The problem is the small mining, because the bigger has more like regulations. But the point is, I think there are not a lot of resources of the government to supervise all the jungle. So because the access is other challenges, because there are not like it's not like the cities. We don't have roads, so that the supervision of the government is difficult in the jungle in particular, where we can see a lot of small illegal mining. So, but the strategy in this part is to try to involve the communities to preserve the idea that it's more important to preserve the forest rather to cut them, and also to protect them as as part of their land, of the community. So that we are working with that, because the government are not enough to tackle with these illegal activities.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, because without having the appropriate support by the local communities, it's almost impossible to keep an eye on every single practices in jungles, right? So completely understand. Yeah. Danny, I have a particular one question to you about, can you elaborate further about the green taxonomies, or have you in Peru, the government has reached agreement with other nations about how to make it specifics about what's happening in European Commission was that nuclear power plant was considered as a low carbon and green technology in a green EU taxonomy. And do you have any other interesting or kind of very challenges while they define a group set of green technologies in Peru?
Well, thank you, Professor, for your question. Well, the thing is that still Peru is in the initial phases, as Carlos mentioned. Peru has many years trying to implement many policies and regulation, but it is related to the idea that Beatrice mentioned before. There are not enough resources, there are not enough, and we are in initial phases. This green fintech that I have spoken of has been basically constructed by private effort and some organizations and with international cooperation. The green taxonomy that I mentioned has been developed with our framework, but it's an initial scope. So it's still a work in progress. I don't think that we have the kind of deep classification like the European Union has already established, the one that you mentioned before about nuclear power. And it was on one of the questions of my slide. As you said, many of the examples that I put are related to adaptation, because people need to keep their business, agricultural business, fishicultural business, and it's to adapt their business to have the less impact in the environment or the most controllable impact in the environment. So we're still working on it with a different view. We have a country that has a lot of vulnerabilities. I don't think that it will be finished in the long run, but with our plan, the competitive plan that I was speaking, that is related to the next decade, I think that we will have something more elaborate, like the European, such as the European has already. That will be my comment regarding it.
If I can contribute with this discussion in terms of Peru, is also part of the list of the critical minerals identified in the world, and therefore, well, we know that those minerals are going to be affecting different procedures and supply chains that are vulnerable for different kind of economies in the near future. So in Peru, there's a lot of discussions right now on how these critical minerals are going to affect the economy in the future. No, Peru hosts every 2 years a convention. It's called Perumin in a province called Arequipa, where they discuss how the mining sector is going to be affected by this in the future. So be aware of the results of this convention. They're going to start talking about how this is going to be measured in the future, and also the use of hydrogen in activities, especially in transportation and other economy activities that that requires different source of energy, and as I said, the critical minerals that are not be sufficient in the future. So so I think in terms of knowledge, here in Peru, we are trying to take or to follow the track on the new trends, and hopefully we can see this is part of the transformation that Peru is trying to do for decades to come.
Okay, I think Professor Kim has some international connection problem. But if no one has any further comments, I will go ahead and wrap up the session. It's okay? Okay, thank you. Thank you again to all of our speakers for participating in our webinar and sharing your knowledge with us today. Before ending the session, I want to let you know that we'll be emailing all of you a participation survey soon. We greatly appreciate it if you would take a few moments to complete it. This will help us improve our webinars in the future. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you all very much. Bye.